Welcome to Science Unit 2, Lesson 8. This refresher video is on analyzing science arguments. So, an overview of Lesson 8 is that students will need to understand the components of the final project, so we'll be going over those. They will brainstorm possible topics that they might want to use for their project, and we're going to go in depth into analyzing science arguments. And so this is something that they started in Unit 1 that will extend a little bit further in Unit 2. And by the end, they'll have a draft of their purpose statement for the final project that they'll develop even more in Lesson 9. So for Activity 1 in Lesson 8, what you'll need to do is explain the task, which is to create a biotechnology research symposium. In the academic notebooks are a list of possible topics, and that's a good thing to show to students as some examples of the kinds of research that they might want to do. They do not have to pick a topic that's off that list, but that list at least has been vetted to know that there's enough information. Because one of the problems is sometimes students will pick a topic that's so new that there really isn't available research to support it, or not enough available research to support it. So it's a good idea to start with that possible list, knowing that they can extend it or expand it somewhat. So what they'll be doing is a poster report. So this is not a term paper, not a book report. Instead, they'll be generating a research poster where they synthesize sources and present a particular point of view. So it's not just an unbiased report. They're going to take a stance and present an argument. It's a good idea to go over the format of the poster because there are some very specific things that they need to include, and to make sure that they understand that even though they're not writing a research report, they will have handouts for people when they come by to listen to the poster. And in the directions is all of that information on what they need to include and how they need to do it. So spending the time to really go through it here will help students prepare for the task when they start to do their research. And so for the scientific poster, you can see that there's a very specific format that we're asking students to do. What doesn't matter, however, is whether they do it virtually or whether they do it on an actual piece of paper. And so in our field tests, we've had some classrooms where students have had access to technology and were able to do a poster using the computer and then share it using the computer. That's great too. It really doesn't matter, but it does matter that they have all of the information outlined here, including some visuals, including really strong scientific backing of their stance, and including the list of recommendations that they have and the references that they used. And so this is both in the lesson plan and in the student academic notebook, so students can refer to that at any time. As they research, they're going to be thinking about the following writing prompt. So, after researching peer-reviewed journal articles on a topic related to biotechnology and health or biotechnology and agriculture, write a research report in the form of a scientific poster in which you discuss the science behind the technology and evaluate current and future applications. Be sure to support your position with evidence from your research. Cite at least 6 to 8 sources, pointing out key elements from each source, and one of your sources will be a section from Phelan 5.11 to 5.19. So if you remember, we finished reading together Phelan 5.10, and that was the introduction to DNA and biotechnology. For this project, what students will do is pick one of the remaining sections that is the closest to their topic, whether it's agriculture or health, and then use that as one of their 6 to 8 sources that they'll use. What's really important is for students to understand that topic selection is key. So some of them may choose topics that are so broad that they could be, a 10-volume series, and some will pick topics that are so narrow that it's hard to even fill a pamphlet. They want something that is manageable in a research poster. So something that they can find enough information about, but not so much information that they'll never be able to cull it down. This is something they'll talk about in small groups so that they can really kind of hone it in. And even though they're going to start thinking about it right now and throughout this lesson, they'll have a chance to refine it and hone it in lesson 9. We want them, however, to be able to articulate the purposes of the project before they even begin. So in their academic notebooks, they're going to jot down the answers to these questions and then talk about them as a whole in class. So what's the purpose? What are they going to need to complete the project? What do they need to turn in? And what are the elements of a poster such as this? And what are the goals? If they can articulate this, they're much more likely to understand what it is they're supposed to do as they get started in doing their own research. So it's a good idea to do this now and continue to talk about it as students go through the whole process between now and the end of the unit. You also need to know that to be able to prepare for this, understanding how to explain and represent science arguments is really important. So it's very different from reading and learning in a textbook. Sometimes textbooks can make it seem like all scientists agree on every single idea, and we all know that that's not true. So part of what they're going to do is be looking for those arguments, be able to pull out the author's argument from the research that they're reading, and be able to create their own argument in their science poster. So they'll need to be able to do both. We're going to get them started by doing a little refresher. So in Science Unit 1, they learned part of Tulemann's argument structure, where they looked at data, claim, warrants, and backing. So spend a little bit of time reviewing those elements with them again. So, the data are the facts, the claim is the conclusions that are drawn, and so forth. And then they're going to apply that to an article. So students will read an article on GMOs that is listed in your lesson plans, and they're going to think about it using the following guiding questions. If you could save lives by producing vaccines in transgenic bananas, would you? And in the debate over large-scale commercialization and use of GMOs, where should we draw the line? So these are 2 ideas related to biotechnology and health, right? So if we can do it, should we do it? And those are things that they want to be thinking about as they go through their own research process. So they're going to read the article, and then in pairs, they're going to try to pull out the elements of the argument so far, right? So data, claim, warrant, and backing, and then use the pro-con chart in the academic notebook to help them kind of discern the argument that the author's making. Then we're going to add 2 pieces to this as well. So not just the data, claim, warrants, and backing, but to this we're going to extend their understanding using qualifiers and rebuttals. So the qualifiers are the special conditions under which the claim can be true, and they're like the limitations. And the rebuttals are the counterarguments. So what do some other people think is true? So using both of those makes for a more nuanced, really robust science argument. So we want them to be able to do all of that using this GMO article as practice and then applying it as they read the articles that they'll go out and collect in lesson 9 for their own science poster. So students will use the pro-con chart, think about the argument, work in pairs to figure out the complete argument, and then present the argument in a sentence. So using this particular sentence pulls together all the different pieces that they just learned so they can succinctly say what the author is trying to argue in this particular piece. After they're done thinking about the arguments, we're going to move on to thinking about their own purpose statement for their research report. So it's a good idea to talk about the difference between a thesis statement and a purpose statement. So they've had a lot of experience writing thesis statements, but probably not a ton writing purpose statements. So this should help with the discussion. So a thesis statement makes an assertion about the topics and how they'll be developed, whereas a purpose statement makes a promise that the argument will be developed, but doesn't do any preview of the conclusions. Thesis statement does make a promise about the purpose, scope, direction of the paper, and summarizes what the conclusions are going to be. A purpose statement doesn't do that. So it announces the purpose, scope, and direction, but that's it. That this paper examines the purpose of this essay is, but no preview. So for an example, so a purpose statement is specific enough to satisfy the requirements of the assignment. So they're common in research paper in the sciences, but some other disciplines consider it too blunt or too direct, but not so in science. This is the way that students are going to be expected to present the beginnings to their papers. So something like this. This paper will examine the ecological destruction of the Sahel preceding the drought and the causes of this disintegration of the land. The focus will be on the economic, political, and social relationships which brought about the environmental problems in the Sahel. So again, it's just sort of saying, this is what we're going to talk about, but no really preview of what the stance is. That's going to be developed as they go through the paper. So this is something that students are going to be asked to do as they think about the topic that they want to research. So using the guide in their academic notebooks, students are going to create their purpose statement. So they're going to think about what is their topic, and so the topic might be something about using DNA and biotechnology to help nourish people in undernourished countries, and then what is your question? And they might ask about a particular type of grain or a particular type of supplement that could be used to do that. What do I need to do to answer the question? So then they'll think about what they need to gather to be able to answer the question, and then what issues need to be addressed. And this is one that they probably can start now, but as they go out and they do some research in the library and they think about what they need to do, this is probably a piece of it that'll continue to be expanded as they go through the process. This is something that they'll do for homework at the end of Lesson 8 and will be discussed at the beginning of Lesson 9. And students should really think about this as a draft. So this is your initial idea of what you might want to do for your project that's going to be refined and honed. So it's sort of their best guess. They haven't really gotten out there and looked at the research yet. But what is it about DNA and biotechnology? Think about the list of possible topics. Thinking about the topics covered in Phelan 511 to 519. What's interesting to them? What do they want to know more about? And this will help them produce a purpose statement. And that is Lesson 8 in a nutshell. Thank you.